This is my first video update coming to you from Nicosia, Cyprus. On this Tuesday, let's talk about some news. Let's discuss what's happening between Armenia and Azerbaijan. There has been a flare-up in tension between the two countries, and Armenia is blaming Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is blaming Armenia. But we now have a cessation to the hostilities, to the fighting on the border between both of these countries. And Pashinyan, the prime minister of Armenia, he called up Putin, he called up Macron, he appealed to the CSTO, which is the Collective Security Organization, kind of like the former Soviet republics NATO, I guess is the best way to describe the CSTO. Say the Eurasian NATO, which is about like 6 or 7 countries: Russia, Belarus, Armenia, Kazakhstan. The CSTO played a key role in stopping the regime change in Kazakhstan, which was like about a year and a half ago, I think. And you also had the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which was in September 2020. It's been 2 years, I think, since that conflict came to an end, brokered by Russia once again. But Pashinyan, the prime minister of Armenia, he made his diplomatic moves. Yesterday, late evening, early morning, at like 2:30 a.m., Moscow brokered a stop to the hostilities, but things flared up again. And then around 8 a.m. Today, you had another stoppage in the hostilities, once again brokered by Russia and by Putin. So Putin has got a lot on his plate, that's for sure. A lot on his plate. And it's a very tricky situation, Armenia and Azerbaijan. Very nuanced, because Armenia is closely aligned with Russia and is part of the CSTO, but Armenia has excellent relations with France, closely aligned with France, and also closely aligned with the United States. It was Joe Biden who recognized the Armenian genocide. He was the first president, I believe, to officially recognize the genocide in Armenia. So things are very nuanced. Azerbaijan has very close relations with Turkey, of course, and also has excellent relations with Russia, and actually has some sort of partnership, I believe, with NATO as well, some sort of collaboration with NATO. And of course, Turkey is part of NATO, but they're also partnering up with Russia on various things. And Macron and Putin, well, they're at different. They're at odds with regards to Ukraine, and of course the United States is at odds with Russia with regards to Ukraine. And Azerbaijan has they have a pretty deep military agreement, I think, with Israel as well. So I mean, there's a lot of Iran is also involved in this area as well, in these alliances as well, and everyone is kind of dipping their toes in with regards to the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So it's a very tricky situation. Pashinyan, for example, he's been domestically. A lot of people believe that he's a tool of the West, right? But and he's cozied up too much to the West. But the first person he calls is Putin. So it's a very complicated, very nuanced situation. It's been said that perhaps this is a second front in order to distract Russia, and in order to complicate things for Russia and for Putin. No doubt that this is probably the last thing that Putin needed. I'm sure that Putin was he has his hands full with Ukraine. He's focused on Ukraine. I'm sure that he's seeing stuff going on between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and he's probably like, oh boy, I've got to put out this fire. So, it definitely does keep the Kremlin busy. But what are they going to do? They're the ones that these countries turn to, which says a lot. You know, the countries that Armenia and Azerbaijan turn to in order to figure out a solution to their problems is the Kremlin, is Russia. So where we stand right now is we do have a cessation to the hostilities, and we'll see what happens next. But I'm pretty confident that Putin and the Kremlin will be able to freeze things, to stop things for now. And is this a second front? Is this meant to distract and to drain Putin's resources and Russia's resources? I don't think so. Could be. Definitely, it's a possibility. But I believe that, in my opinion, I would think that because Armenia also and Azerbaijan also have alliances to NATO countries and to a lot of the collective West, I think that this conflict between these two countries is a lot more complicated than just starting a second front against Russia. That may be one of the things that's going on, but I think it's much more complicated than that. If this was like Georgia, if like things were heating up in Georgia or Moldova or Kosovo, Medohia, then I would say, okay, you know, it's the Department of State, Blinken and Nuland, they're trying to start things up. And they're trying to complicate things for Russia. But in this instance, I would say perhaps there are certain parts of this Department of State that are trying to stir things up in the Caucasus, but I think it's a very complicated situation. Very complicated situation. And just the other day, I think Putin actually was speaking with Macron. So I'm not sure if they spoke about tensions in Armenia and Azerbaijan, because I think their phone call took place before this latest flare-up. But you know, there you have two leaders that are on opposing sides in Ukraine. But when it comes to Armenia, they're both aligned with Armenia. So we'll see how everything plays out. My best guess here would be that Russia does manage to get a handle on things, and they speak to both sides and they mediate a type of secession with regards to this conflict. So that is, I think that was the big news from yesterday. And let's talk now about the main conflict, which is Ukraine. And the entire internet, much of the media is focused on Kharkov and has been focused on Kharkov and the Ukraine military's advance in Kharkov. But I've said in a couple of videos that we need to continue to keep an eye out as for what's happening in Donetsk and in Bakhmut, because the Wagner guys, the Wagner group, they're making big advancements towards Bakhmut. And right now they're on the outskirts of Bakhmut, Soledar, and they're poised to, it looks like they're poised to begin an operation to take Bakhmut and to liberate Bakhmut. And Bakhmut is the key city for the full liberation of Donetsk at this moment in time. It's a key region which sits right on a major highway with regards from if you're looking from west to east. So it's a key transportation hub. It's a fairly large city. It's a population of about 73,000. And so this is a big deal if the Russians, if the Wagner guys end up taking Bakhmut. In my opinion, it would mean the beginning of the end of the liberation of Donetsk. I mean, that's how key of a city it is. I mean, it would signify a huge victory for Russia, and I think there is a lot of focus right now from the Russian military and from the Kremlin to secure Bakhmut. And if you look at Kharkov and what the Ukraine military, their advance in Kharkov and the area that they took over, fairly unopposed, actually pretty much unopposed by the Russians, something like 2,500, 3,000 square kilometers, but very sparsely populated. Bakhmut is a whole different deal. I mean, you're talking about a key industrial transportation area, transportation hub, and so this is huge. And the media, the collective West media, is obviously, for obvious reasons, they're avoiding any discussion of the Russian advances towards Bakhmut, and they're trying to focus on the Ukraine victory in Kharkov for reasons that we all understand. But we also have news that the Ukraine military is, well, they were thinking of Ugledar, but the last they were thinking of making opening up another front in the direction of Ugledar and perhaps towards Mariupol. But the last reports that I got is that the Ugledar campaign is starting to, it appears that it might be fizzling out. I don't want to say for sure, but you know, the forces in Kherson, in the south, in Donbass, in this area that Ukraine is considering a second or third front, is not even remotely comparable to Kharkov. Kharkov had something like 2,000 Russian troops there. I mean, it was really thinned out. The Russians really thinned out their presence in Kharkov. In the Kherson, South Donbass area, I mean, Ukraine is going to run into an extremely powerful and formidable Russian force in that area. So this idea of opening up a front in the Ugledar, say, South Ukraine direction it's not going to be anything like Kharkov. And Kharkov, the Ukraine military, they paid and they continue to pay a very heavy price for the territory that they gained in casualties. So yes, they gained territory. The Russians didn't oppose them in that territorial gain, but the casualties that the Ukraine military has suffered is in the thousands. And so they're paying, and they continue to pay a very heavy price for that territorial gain. But we are getting reports as well that aside from Ugledar, the Zelensky regime is also considering opening up a front in Zaporozhye and perhaps targeting the takeover of the ZNPP, the nuclear power plant in Zaporozhye. Perhaps that might also be a target or a goal of theirs. But once again, you're going to be looking at stiff resistance if the Ukraine military does decide to take that up. And I would imagine that the casualties suffered in Kharkov would pale in comparison to what the Ukraine military would suffer if they decide to either go in the Ugledar or Zaporozhye direction. Anything around Donetsk, Kherson, Zaporozhye, anything there is going to be, in my opinion, is going to be a complete disaster for Ukraine. But as with anything, it's very fluid, and I could be completely wrong in my assessments, in the way I see things. But it seems like this may be more of Zelensky hubris than smart military strategy. And I even think the Pentagon and the U.S. has warned Zelensky multiple times about making advancements in this southern, southeastern direction. But you know, Zelensky, he's feeling good. He's feeling high on his hubris. So he may actually push the Ukraine military to do such a thing, to keep the momentum going, because if you keep the momentum going, then you keep the money and the weapons flowing, and everyone is happy, right? because it does seem like Kharkov, everything that happened in Kharkov is starting to taper off now. The momentum appears to be tapering off. Yes, you do have some villages changing hands, but we're talking about areas with like a population of something like 300 to 800 people. I mean, you're talking about very small villages that are being contested now in the Kharkov area. But for the most part, it does look like the Russian military has brought in the reinforcements to stabilize their position on the river. So let's see, is that everything with regards to Ukraine? There was a poll that came out. I saw this on Zero Hedge that came out the other day, a Statista survey in Ukraine that was conducted, and they asked the question. Actually, let me pull it up here if I have it handy to make sure I get the question right. So this is a Statista poll. And they asked the question, do you believe Ukraine will win the war? And let me put the results on the screen here for everybody to see. And in April 2022, 97% of Ukrainians surveyed said yes, 2% said no, and 1% said difficult to answer. They asked the same question in June 2022, and 98% of Ukrainians said yes, Ukraine will win. 1% said no, and 1% said difficult to answer. So you had a 1% change towards yes, Ukraine will win the war from April to June. I wonder what the results of the poll would be if it was taken today after the Kharkov momentum. But this makes me think. I think to myself and I say, you know, we're all consumed in what's happening in Kharkov. Like everyone is fixated on everything that has taken place in Kharkov. But I wonder how much of the Ukrainian population. First of all, I wonder from what regions the people came from that were surveyed. I wonder what regions this survey took place in. But I also wonder, do the Ukrainians, are they getting news as to what's happening in Donetsk and the Wagner Group's advancements towards Bakhmut and the military situation there? Or are they only getting news about the advance in Kharkov, and how much of the real story are people getting? Because while this was a Ukraine advancement, a victory, they paid a very heavy price, and this was very much uncontested. I mean, the Russians really didn't engage with the Ukraine military as the military was moving in, not understanding what happened in Kharkov and not taking away from what the Ukraine military did, which is to mount a successful counteroffensive, without understanding the dynamics of what happened, the context and the details of how this was achieved. You know, when you survey people in Ukraine, they're going to say, yes, we're going to win this war, and they may actually believe that making a move in the south and the southeast direction is going to deliver the same results. And so that, not having all the information can lead to terrible consequences. But I thought I would report this survey to everybody because it's interesting. It is an interesting survey. The Kremlin actually came out with statements the other day. Peskov, his office, they came out with statements, and they said that negotiations are pretty much done with regards to trying to find a settlement for this conflict. My personal belief is that if there's any time for Ukraine to look for a peace deal, it would be now. If Zelensky would back away from his ego and his hubris and actually decide to look to salvage something of the Ukrainian state, now would be the time to approach the Kremlin and say, look, let's try to solve this, and let's try to find a negotiated settlement. But as I've just reported, that doesn't look like to be the case. It looks like hubris, momentum, ego, money, weapons, all of these things are pushing the Zelensky regime to decide to give another crack at Kherson, at the Kherson direction, Kherson Zaporozhye. But the Kremlin has said, and I'm looking at a tweet here from the AFP news agency, they are saying, breaking, Kremlin says no prospect for negotiations with Kiev. And this was the message that Peskov also relayed to journalists. And he also reiterated the line that we've become so used to when the Kremlin discusses a special military operation. They say all objectives of the special military operation will be achieved. And he repeated those lines during his statements with journalists. And the big question now is, are we going to be talking about a special military operation going forward? Because after Peskov put out these statements, we've kind of had about a day, half a day to a day of radio silence from the Kremlin. And we are getting, how do I say, we're getting a lot of reports. There's a lot of rumors and talk swirling about a change of objectives, a change in narrative by the Kremlin, and the change may take form in moving away from a special military operation and going towards an anti-terrorist operation, upgrading the scope and objectives of this conflict for Russia. And what that would mean is that Russia considers what's going on in Ukraine as akin to its campaigns in Chechnya and Syria. And practically speaking, what that would mean is that the military would have its hands untied. Right now it's fighting Ukraine and it's fighting NATO. It's fighting NATO with both hands tied behind its back, and branding this as an anti-terrorist campaign would, and branding's probably not the right word, legally changing what's going on to an anti-terrorist campaign would mean that those hands become untied for the military, and essentially the military is allowed to do what militaries are there to do. No constraints and none of these limitations that the special military operation placed on the military. And that would be a big game changer. We saw the first indications that this is going to take place with the missile strikes on the thermal power plants and the critical infrastructure. And I think that's the first indication that, from a legal perspective, from a military and legal perspective, the scope of the operation is being upgraded. It is changing from an SMO to anti-terrorist, and that would be huge. That would mean things are going to escalate on the initiative of the Russians, and this is coming at a time in the middle of September, where we are heading very, very quickly towards winter, and the EU, the European economies, the collective West economies, are absolutely crumbling. Gas, by the way, is still being delivered via Ukraine. It's not being delivered via Nord Stream 1, but gas transit via Ukraine is still being delivered. And I would imagine that if things are upgraded to an anti-terrorist operation, I wonder what that would mean for gas deliveries via Ukraine. The Ukrainian economy, by the way, every month is running something like a $7-8 billion dollar deficit. I mean, the economy in Ukraine has completely collapsed. It's completely tanked. They're 100% dependent on the collective West. Actually, Zelensky even came out with a statement the other day. He was speaking somewhere. They had him speaking at some event or something. And actually CNN, he was on CNN, and he actually admitted that Ukraine is 100% dependent on the United States, like completely dependent on the United States for everything. And while EU economies, well, they're collapsing. I was reading Sonar 21, and they noted that two big industries in Europe are falling apart. Two big companies in Europe are running into big problems. One of them is the steel industry in Germany, and I forgot the name of the company, Mittal in Germany. And I know you'll let me know in the comments down below. But they've already closed two factories, and given the rising price of energy costs, they just can't produce anymore. This is steel that we're talking about, steel, and they're kaput. They're pretty much done. They need some sort of help in order to get through this crisis. And then you have the Swedish company Electrolux, I believe, that make washing machines and dryers and household appliances. And things are looking really bad for them as well, because demand is drying up. People just aren't buying their products. The cost to make those products has also risen, but demand is also dropping. And so, when a company closes a factory, industries that are absolutely critical, like the steel industry, or say a company like Electrolux, when they're running into problems, they're going to be laying people off. They're going to be closing down factories. You're going to have you're going to have people not earning an income. They're going to be unemployed, which means that they're going to have less spending power. I mean, the chain reaction is huge. And, you can layer on top of that inflation, the rising cost of electricity and gas, and all of these things on top of the fact that businesses are shutting down or closing factories and laying people off. I mean, it's an absolute train wreck of a disaster. And I'm thinking of the timing if Russia does decide to step things up and move towards an anti-terrorist operation, which means they're going to really turn up the heat on Zelensky and Ukraine, coupled with the economic situation of the collective West, and specifically Europe, as we head into winter. Summer's over. As we head into winter, this could be a game-changing moment. This next week or two could be a game-changing moment as far as the trajectory of this conflict, because Zelensky and the collective West, they're going along as if they're going to drag this war on for the next couple of years. They're seeing a protracted, long war. And Zelensky and the Zelensky regime, they're asking for long-range missiles now. They're asking the United States to provide them long-range missiles so they can start targeting, start targeting Crimea and the Russian Federation. And they're looking to escalate. I talked about an article on The Hill that was on The Hill 4 or 5 days ago, where there were a lot of anonymous Pentagon officials who told reporters that the U.S. believes that if they do provide Ukraine with long-range missiles and lethal weapons that could strike Russian territory, they were under the impression that Russia would not retaliate, given all the other provocations that they've done during this conflict, like little pinprick strikes in Crimea and using drones to blow up ammo depots, or targeting Belgorod right above Kharkov and stuff like this. They were under the impression that these types of operations that they've done in the past means that if they were to provide Ukraine with lethal long-range weaponry capable of striking Russia deep inside of Russia, that Russia would not do anything. They're under the impression that Russia is bluffing as far as retaliation goes. So, the message of going after the critical infrastructure, the message of ramping this up to an anti-terrorist operation, coupled with the economic collapse of the collective West, specifically the EU, as we head into winter, might change people's belief system in the collective West, so that they take a step back and say, you know what, this is not going to be a protracted, extended war. The dynamics these past 2 weeks, they've changed. I don't think that's going to happen because, all these guys, they have no reverse gear. And I think they're going to probably go in the opposite direction and tell Zelensky, you make a move towards Mariupol, make a move towards Zaporozhye, let's get long-range weapons to the Zelensky regime. EU continue to find different ways to provoke Russia and different types of sanctions, policies and tricks or whatever you can do, and let's continue to ramp this up. And I think they're going to go in the exact opposite direction. But all the signs are pointing to a major change in what's been going on with regards to this conflict between Russia and the collective West. I don't even want to say Russia and Ukraine anymore, because when you start to talk about the economic part of the equation, which is the real big, that's a really big part of everything that's going on. You have to say Russia and the collective West, Russia and NATO. So I think I'll end the video there. I don't believe I have anything else to talk about. Greece. Here's an interesting bit of news. Greece has said that they can't provide S-300s to Ukraine. Ukraine asked for S-300s, and the Greek Ministry of Defense said we can't give you any because we got to look after our own defense, given the tensions between Turkey. But Greece has said no more weapons. Add Greece to a long list of EU countries that have said we just don't have any more weapons to give you, or at least any sophisticated weapons to give you. The US, they may be toying around with lethal long-range types of missiles, but it looks like the EU, or many EU countries, are tapped out. The German defense minister said something along the same lines with regards to, I believe, tanks. I think she said that Germany just simply can't provide tanks to any more tanks to Ukraine. And Bill Gates, Billy G, he came out with a statement yesterday or today, and he said that this war in Ukraine is draining many of the funds that EU countries would initially pour into his various charities and his various foundations. I thought that was interesting. You have Bill Gates now starting to say, look, this is all well and good to try and destroy Russia in the name of globalism and in the name of the Great Reset, but you know what? Destroying Russia in the name of the Great Reset is sucking away much of the money that you were pouring into my foundations, which were pushing along the Great Reset. So you see how that works? It's all, it's all messed up. Everything's upside down, it seems. So Bill Gates is sounding the alarm, and he's saying, we're starting to see a lot of the money that the EU used to be giving me and my foundations. Well, we're starting to see that money being redirected to Zelensky and the Zelensky regime. With that news about Bill Gates, that could have been a clown world. Let's do a real clown world, and let's talk about Brian Stelter and the fact that the former CNN host of the show Reliable Sources, he has been promoted. He has been given a new job courtesy of Harvard University. And we always say on this channel, don't worry about these globalist shills. Never worry about these neoliberal globalist shills. If they lose a job one day, or if they're voted out of office one day, the next day they'll get promoted somewhere else. Their incompetency does not go unnoticed by the oligarch Klaus Schwab class. And in this case, you have Brian Stelter, who put out this tweet. He said, Personal news, I'm joining the Shorenstein Center at Harvard Kennedy School. This fall, I'll be the Walter Shorenstein Media and Democracy Fellow, convening discussions, some of which will be live streamed. Grateful to Nancy Gibbs and her team for the home. So, he's landing on his feet, Brian Stelter. And they always do land on their feet, don't they? So that's the clown world. I'll leave it there. And I'm waiting for Mark Dice to do his video update with Brian Stelter, because his Brian Stelter impersonation is the best. He's the one that probably made Brian Stelter famous. Anyway, I will leave it there. TheDuran.locals.com. Take care.